So I'm going to pass over to Peter Day, who's going to start us off tonight.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the e-chat. This is my first ever e-chat, so if I stumble around, please forgive me. And we've got lots of helpers here that'll put me straight. Welcome everybody who's on the chat line. I chair the board for Multiple Sclerosis Limited, and I'll chair this meeting, but there'll be other people involved and speaking. Now the next slide, please.
You can do that.
Oh, I can do that, can I? Thank you. I can do that. That's good. And just a formal and respectful acknowledgement. We acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians, past and present, on whose lands we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country, and respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. Now, the purpose of today's chat, you can see some words up there. We've been meeting face-to-face with people affected by MS in each of the states over the last few months. And the object of this meeting, this webinar, is to provide an extra opportunity for you to access the boards and board members, and for the board to hear directly from anyone who's living with, caring for people with multiple sclerosis. And that, of course, is the same purpose as the MS advisory councils, who do a tremendous job in keeping us very informed about the things that matter to people directly affected by MS. Today we're going to have what might be called a panel-style discussion on 4 of the major themes we heard around the traps at the face-to-face meetings. So we'll start off with that, but then there'll be the opportunity for you to ask questions on those themes or anything else that you want to do. Now, the board members on the call today, you can see a slide of 4 beautiful people. Myself, Chris Gillies is in traffic at the moment and is probably banging on the door down here at Blackburn to be let in, and she'll be with us very shortly. She'll participate. And then we have Ian Pennell and Ian Gordon, our 2 ACT stalwarts who are on the board, and hopefully they're logged in and listening and will speak at the relevant times. Other directors may well be listening in, but we decided we'd keep it to a foursome today, and obviously at another time we can bring in other directors as required. Robin Hunter is with us today as well, so as any good chairman does, if any of the questions are really tricky, you pass it to somebody who is supposed to have all the answers. So those are the people on today's call. And Chris Gillies is just coming into the room very shortly. We'll give her time to settle down before we ask her to do any real work today. Over here, Chris, sit on this side. And I'll make sure, and don't pull any wires or press any buttons. Okay, next slide. The NDIS. Now, you can see that slide there. It has 3 or 4 bullet points, but obviously at the forums that we attended, people were asking a lot of questions about the NDIS, and they were really asking what is the status of the NDIS and how are we in MS involved. We calculate that at the moment 400 people who live with MS have had their lives improved by the NDIS, and I do acknowledge in some cases the NDIS isn't meeting expectations, but I put that down to a lot of startup and teething problems. But nevertheless, we'll talk about how we can be sure that we get the most out of the NDIS. Now, our objective is obviously to provide MS support coordination for people who are accessing the NDIS, which is all about helping people make their plans active. We also can provide pre-planning and advice through MS Connect, and we're registered to provide or point you to several other services too, whether that's OT, physio, day programs, short-term accommodation, respite, continence assessment, exercise physiology, and personal training. Now, people who aren't eligible for the NDIS can access what we call our mission services, and those are the services that we aim to provide forever and a day through MS Connect MS Advisor, MS Peer Support, and MS Education. So I guess the sort of summary message about the NDIS is that if you haven't already done so, please contact us about the NDIS and we can help you to get the best out of it and the best plan possible. Now, we'll take any questions you have on the NDIS through this meeting, and we'll either answer them directly or we'll get someone to give you an answer, or at least a connection tonight. So that's the...
we'll do the first question.
Oh, sure. But,
so what will happen if I'm not eligible for the NDIS?
okay, sure, Robin.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. I guess the main point is that it's really important to try and understand what the NDIS might mean for you, and really go through the process of trying to access funded supports through the NDIS. Importantly, if you have been declined from the NDIS, talk to us, because we can advocate personally for you. So the best thing is to contact us, and we can talk through your particular situation through our MS Connect. The other option is to also attend the NDIS conversation forums, and that's really been proven to be very popular and well attended by people who know that the NDIS rollout is coming into their area. Really, really importantly though, the mission services that Peter was describing, our MS Connect services, they're available to you irrespective of whether you have an NDIS funded package or not.
So could you repeat the mission services? We've had a question asking what exactly are the mission services.
And maybe what defines them.
The mission services, and you can blame me for that language, because it's just the way that I understand what we're funded to provide versus what we provide through our funds raised through fundraising. So anything that we've self-funded, I describe as a mission service. So that's our MS Connect service and our MS Advisor service, our MS Peer Support program, and our really popular education programs.
We've had another question. Should we be making contact with MS now, even when NDIS isn't rolling out until later?
Yeah, I'd encourage you to do so, because there's actually quite a lot to get your head around. It's even a whole different language we're all having to learn. So I don't think it's ever too early to do so. It's better to be really, I guess, prepared and really comfortable in actually understanding what it might mean for you. What sort of goals would you be aspiring to, and understanding how you might put your case forward on your best footing.
Okay. Maybe turning to the next slide, Chris Gillies is here, and she's going to share some feedback about what this all means to the over 65s, which of course includes people like me. But
yeah, and me. Look, there's been quite a lot of forums, and people have really expressed their concerns about what will happen to those people that are over 65 and not eligible for NDIS. And I guess the key, and I fall into that category actually, what funded services will be available for over 65s? And the answer is that the government will provide those disability services for over 65 for the services that you have previously received. If you have been receiving those services from MSL prior to turning 65, they'll continue after 65. The thing is, and I fall into a category, and I've never had disability services, but if something really unfortunate happened and I have an attack that causes disability and I'm well over 65, then I'll go into the aged care system, and which is probably doesn't feel like the best place to go. And I guess anybody else who's in that position feels the same way. So we really see this as a very high advocacy priority. And we're working very closely with MS Australia to try and keep this on, the NDIS's radar screen and try and get them to do something about it.
Robin, could
Right.
you, there's a little piece here relating to the rollout that's been happening, and maybe you could cover that.
Yeah.
Okay, the rollout hasn't actually been confirmed other than for New South Wales. So for those residents of New South Wales, we do know that the first rollout areas for this program that Chris was talking about, it's called the Continuity of Support Program. And the first rollout areas in New South Wales are Nepean, Blue Mountains, Central West, Hunter, Mid-North Coast, New England and Southern Highlands. Now we haven't had the rollout details confirmed for Victoria, and we haven't had the rollout details confirmed for ACT or Tasmania at this point in time. So as Chris said, the thing that's probably important is the funding is very person specific. So if you're actually someone who's received services from us in the last 12 months, that name is something that is attached to this COS program. And so if you think you fall into that category, please contact us to make sure that you can access that. We're calling it now the COS funding program.
Okay. Any questions coming forward on that?
We have an NDIS question.
Yeah.
So once we have an NDIS package,
Yep.
can we access any services from MS outside of you as a provider?
Yes, yes. So for if in your funded NDIS package, if I'm understanding the question correctly, you have funding for something that we're a registered provider of. So say you have funding available for therapy, you can actually purchase your therapy services from us. So we're a registered provider of a number of things. I'll go through them again. The main one is the support coordination, but we're also a registered provider of physiotherapy, occupational therapy, day programs. The NDIS language for respite is short-term accommodation, so we need to be quite specific about that. Continence assessment, exercise physiology and personal training. We're also a registered provider for residential services as well. So for those services you can access us with your funded packages, but always importantly we're there for you with our mission services as described before. So even if you don't have an NDIS package, please contact us and see what it is that we can do to support your needs.
And even if you do have an NDIS package, all those mission services are available on top of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Including the employment service, which we haven't touched on today.
So we have a question about access to direct services through local team members, which we'll be covering later in the presentation. So we might hold that one. And the other question is, if we haven't accessed services through MS in the past 12 months, is it in our best interest to do so as soon as possible for the continuity of service?
Yes. Yes. I think I'll say that because at least then you've made contact with us and we know about you. Whether you'll be granted some funding under continuity of support, I can't give that assurance, but at least if you contact us, we know that you have some unmet needs and we're here to help.
Okay, we're just checking any more questions coming online. No, you're okay? Okay with that. We'll move on to the next slide, and that is about advocacy, and I'm hoping that Ian Pennell is online to cover this particular topic. Ian, are you present and online?
Can you hear me, Peter?
Yes, we can.
I'm here, Peter. Am I here?
Yes, we can hear you. Off you go, Ian.
Okay. Okay, thank you. At several of the forums this year, people were interested in how we managed advocacy, such as lobbying on behalf of people with MS to prescribe drugs to be included in the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. The underlying question that sums this up is, how can advocacy help each one of us? There are two levels of advocacy: local advocacy directed to help you personally, and national advocacy attempting to help and advance the benefits for all people with MS. Firstly, our MS team members can support you to understand and access available support and services, as we've just heard, help you to take control over a situation and to negotiate the health and disability system. We're here at all times and we can be contacted through MS Connect. And secondly, we also work with Multiple Sclerosis Australia through their National Advocates Program, which aims to bring about change on big priority issues, such as getting prescribed drugs to be included in the pharmaceutical benefit scheme, obtaining services for over 65s, not entitled to NDIS benefits, and striving to ensure that NDIS works for people with MS. We do this by lobbying politicians and working to change community attitudes. You may ask, how is advocacy managed nationally by Multiple Sclerosis Australia? Well, the MSA National Advocates team, all volunteers living with MS, is led by Andrew Potter from Tasmania. He is the National Advocate Coordinator. As a person with MS with a charismatic personality, he is highly respected as an advocate. There are 15 advocates throughout Australia, all living with MS, coming from every state and from the ACT. The advocates team formulates, reviews and prioritises advocacy issues which are submitted for endorsement by the MSA board and the wider family of MS organisations, including MSL. They lobby their local members and senators for their support in the political parliamentary process. They meet at least once a year, face to face, and with the support of the MS advocacy staff, make presentations to the Parliamentary Friends of MS group in the National Parliament, including participating in gatherings on specific issues, such as recently in an employment summit. Ring MS Connect if you want to put forward an advocacy issue for consideration, and MSL will pass it on to MS Australia for consideration and for action.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. And if there are any questions on advocacy, please enter those in either now or as we progress the e-chat. Is there anything coming up just at the moment?
Just clarifying how they can best communicate the issues back to MS. So do we want to go over that?
Do you want me to take that one, Peter?
Sure.
Sure. Could you just say that? Could you just say that again, please?
Just clarifying how.
Could you just repeat that question, please?
Just clarifying how people can put forward their advocacy issues, Ian?
There's a number of ways that
as I said towards the end, if we invite them to use the MS Connect service to put forward ideas of advocacy that they would like to pursue. Then it will go through the situation of assessment, which will go back to the panel of 15 that are in the advocacy team, all people with MS, and they will prioritise those particular issues and have them endorsed by both the national board and by the various boards of called MS societies, including MSL. We do that to ensure that with the limited resources we actually get the highest priority matters up, and we're actually chasing the best bang for the dollar.
And is there an ideal time of year to put those issues forward?
And we will take them at any time, but the ideal time is in the second half of the calendar year or the first half of the financial year, because that suits the timetable which leads to the major push on advocating to the politicians as they lead up to budget time, which is normally these days held in the early part of the fourth quarter of the financial year, but therefore about March, April. But we would like any new issues brought to us in the first half of the year.
So
financial year. I want to make that quite clear. We're talking about the second half of the calendar year.
Yeah. So anything up to the 31st of December has got a good chance of getting on the list.
Oh, we prefer it early as possible.
Yeah, that's
we prefer it as early as possible because the assessment process and the process of preparing a submission takes some time. So the earlier it gets in, the more energy that can be put into pursuing the issue.
great.
Can I just add to that, Ian, if you don't mind? It's Robin here again. One of the things that we do also use is the MSACs to actually help us with that. So, for example, the MSAC Victoria did a joint submission with MSL and MSA, giving some feedback on the draft Victorian State Disability Plan. So that's a really effective way also of having your say. So that's through each of the MSACs and the details for the MSACs. You can find that on our website. They've got their own web page and they've got their own Facebook sites as well.
Good.
Yes, there are many ways and many doors to open, and all of them are, you're welcome to use them. If you can't remember the detail, because sometimes detail's hard to remember, that's why we're suggesting that the MS Connect staff can put you in the right direction by coming through them.
Thanks. We have a general question that's come through. So why do people in rural areas receive less services?
Yeah, I'll try and take that. Look, I actually recognise this has been quite a long-standing issue and one we've been trying to tackle for a long while. I really like to think that the NDIS aims to fix this, that it actually is the same bucket of money irrespective of whether you live in the city or in the country. However, one of the things that we are aware of is that sometimes the services aren't there. So it's all very well to have the funding approved in your plan, but quite often, more often than not, it's really hard to actually find local providers to do that. So again, please work with us and we can work with you to find some local providers. So again, contact MS Connect if you're having problems finding availability in your local area.
And that's quite a topical issue at the moment, because I think it was this morning as I was driving in, I heard on ABC Melbourne this very issue of accessing services in rural Australia or country Australia, and so clearly there's things happening there that are, if you like, rattling the cages. But I think Robin's answer is most practical, to contact us. But obviously it'll be interesting to see how that issue works its way out in terms of the NDIS and the like. Okay.
We have an advocacy question.
Yes.
Do positions ever become available to join the advocacy team, and how is this advertised?
Do you want to just kick off with that, Ian, from an MSA point of view?
Well, it's more on a volunteer basis. If somebody's interested, if they approach the MSA staff, which are also in the offices at Blackburn, and an introduction to Andrew will take place, because he actually seeks through all sorts of channels that he's got people who, applicants who wish to actually act in that capacity. He puts out appeals, but sometimes you might not be the end of that appeal. So if that's the case, take the first step forward, open the door and make the call, and we will ensure that you are considered, and if it's appropriate, appointed to a position. But we don't have a lot of them because resources are limited, and the cost of bringing everybody together is quite high. So we are looking for people that are dedicated to the sorts of issues that we're actually advocating for from time to time. So don't be disappointed if you don't get selected, but please put your name forward if you consider that you've got something that you wish to offer.
Thanks, Ian. Anything else coming through? Not at the moment. Okay, we'll move to the next slide, and that's discussion about local presence and the way that works. And Ian Gordon, are you online to take that, please?
Yes, I am, Peter.
Off you go. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's a good, well, we've got a fair amount of experience about this in the ACT. In a perfect world, we would provide face-to-face support for everybody who wants it. Clearly, that's not always possible. We just discussed people in remote and regional areas. We have people who can't travel because of their conditions. And we have also funding limitations with the loss of the government funding we were getting, and we just can't employ the number of staff we'd like. So MSL has to find ways of making our staff resources go further and find ways of keeping in contact with people who we can't physically reach. We've discussed a little while ago mission services such as MS Connect, which is going from strength to strength, the MS Advisor and MS Education. But there are quite a number of other ways where we're able to reach people. Our peer support program is a very effective way of providing local support. We are having regular community forums. In fact, we were lucky to have our chairman and our CEO in Canberra just yesterday. We have newsletters, both in focus, which is the MSL newsletter, and local newsletters. We have our MSACs and advisory boards, which are another way of providing information and helping people keep in contact with each other. We have webinars such as this one. And I've also been very grateful here in the ACT for special, or what I've called special staff visits. Whereas if we need a nurse or a community support worker or one of the executive staff to come and visit us in the ACT to meet our community, then our executive staff has been very keen to stop what they're doing and come up and meet with us. As we get more funding under the NDIS, that is to say, as we provide more services, and if we increase our fundraising, then we would like to think that we could hire more local staff. But in the meantime, we're going to use all the technology we can put our hands on. We're going to use all the community and support services that we can create, our newsletters, and using the support from MSL to keep in contact with people for what they need at a particular time and when they need it. So I think under the circumstances, there is a huge range of very effective support services to increase the local presence that we have.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, appreciate that. Have any questions arrived just at this point, or obviously they can come through at any time?
Will there be a nurse in Canberra?
Will there be a nurse in Canberra? Well, we had this question put to us yesterday, obviously down in Canberra, and the MS Nurse Advisor approach is what we would call an ongoing component of our nursing care, based on the success of the recent MS Advisor pilot. But in Canberra, we have found it very challenging, very difficult to recruit a nurse, and I don't know the local employment conditions down in Canberra, but it seemed, do we get any responses to our adverts at all?
No, we've had none.
We've had none. Okay, but we've seen a lot of the people in ACT using the MS Nurse Advisor approach, and Professor, I think it's Lueck, he's the neuro at Canberra Hospital, he's regularly referring his patients to the MS Nurse Advisor service. At the same time, Robin committed, I think yesterday, that where we can get some planned visits for face-to-face appointments, we'll do that by sending somebody who's based elsewhere into the ACT. So the answer is, will there be a nurse in Canberra? There'll be certainly the MS Nurse Advisor service. We'll continue to advertise for that position, and we'll do our best to get a resource down there where it's best to have a face-to-face appointment. So that's a question that came up yesterday. Will there be a nurse in Canberra? Anything else come through on the message system? Not just at the moment. Okay, well, I'll turn to the last slide, but then but then open it up for general discussion. This slide just really sort of says this is the way you can get through to the board through any number of means. The MS advisory councils can be contacted via email and Facebook, and then you've got listed there the four MS advisory groups, including a newly formed MS Advisory Council for Tasmania. We're enormously grateful for the people who chair those committees and give the feedback to us. But of course, you can contact us directly through MS Connect. So any of the issues that have been raised tonight, you can talk to someone in MS Connect, and they can either channel your query or your point of view through to the MSACs, or through to the board, or through to MSA, for example, where Ian was talking about the advocates. So MS Connect is a pretty full-on service, 5 days a week, and through extended hours, I think, as well.
8:30 to 5?
8:30 to 5. Okay.
What other advisory services do we have? Is a question that's come in.
So we've highlighted that response, so the advisory role, and we've got the nurse advisor role, and we've had social work advisor, we've had OT advisor. Based on feedback and I guess how many people have accessed those services, we've been continuing with the MS Nurse Advisor. It's very, very well received, and also the Social Work Advisor, because we do recognise that both people with MS and their carers do need to get some emotional support, and as appropriate, direct referrals to local providers of, for example, clinical and neuropsych services. The OT advisor, we actually have not replaced that role because we had very, very low numbers of people actually using that service. So we're really just responding to the feedback and the use of the services and trialling the advisor approach.
Okay.
There was a comment came in about counselling, and I guess I would just like to add to that there are some great Medicare supported services around counselling that people can access through their GP.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that we fund all of those programs. There are already funded programs to support that.
There was, you know, I think a couple of years ago we had one clin-psych, and that was based in New South Wales, but we recognised that we had limited funding and we had massive inequity because we had no psych in any of the other jurisdictions, none in VIC, none in ACT. And we recognised that exactly to the point just made, that you can actually access those services under the Medicare scheme through an extended care package. So it's really important to actually talk to one of our social workers. So we have social workers and we have the social work advisors, and talk with them, and as appropriate they may direct a referral back through the GP to actually access the Medicare funded package around psych services.
Given our experience interacting with the NDIS so far, would we see it as positive or otherwise?
I think I would have to answer that it's positive.
Yeah.
Of the 400 people that we've supported, we're hearing wonderful stories about improved outcomes for them. And so even though all of us at times are feeling quite frustrated with the way that the scheme's being rolled out, I think we actually really need to remain very committed to supporting the rollout of the scheme in the most positive way we can, because you know, it really is making quite a difference to those people that we've tracked through their participation in the scheme and the supports that they're now receiving. Notwithstanding, I don't want to discount the challenges and frustrations that people are experiencing day to day in actually interacting with the agency and the planners, but again, persevere and work through it, and at any point in time you can request a review of your plan. So if it's not adequate for your needs, you've just got to speak up and request another review meeting, and we can support you to make sure that the NDIA are understanding what unmet needs that you do have. If necessary, we can also assist in an appeals process. So there is a kind of escalation path within the NDIA. So you can ask for the review, and then the next escalation point is to actually go through the appeals process, and we can assist both with that appeals process, and at your request we can attend the plan review meetings as well.
Good. We're just looking online for any other questions.
Any specific personal issues, the best thing to do is to email msconnect@ms.org.au or call into MS Connect, and we'll help facilitate those.
Okay. If there's no other questions coming up, are there any points that, oh, there is one coming up.
There's been some media coverage recently suggesting that the NDIS might be blowing the budget and have to wind back its aspirations. Do the board have any similar concerns?
That's a what do you call a big medicine ball question, and I think in a sense I'd give a political answer to it. I think having set up the NDIS, both parties are committed to achieving the objectives. So I think it will be very hard politically for anybody to scale back the principles and the intent of the NDIS. I think you will come up against issues at an individual level from time to time as to whether a particular activity will be supported, and Robin's just talked about the way we can help with that. But I just feel, you know, it will be very hard for governments to walk away from the commitments and the kind of dollars. And Chris or Ian, Chris, do you have a view on that?
I would agree with what you're saying. It's a bipartisan that both parties are agreeing, and it's very hard to walk away from.
I mean, look, there may be sort of management of the process, and there may be rollouts may not occur as quickly as possible. I mean, I think the NDIA and the NDIS people are under a tremendous pressure, and we have to assume that they are people who are committed to the principles of the organisation, and they're operating within the envelope that they've been given. So I think, regrettable though it may be, this is a game of persistence. So it's a game of making sure that your application is put in. It's a game of making sure that your needs are expressed. It's making sure that you get support from MS in building the case. And if you don't get what you need, it's about persistence in asking again and taking it through the appeal process. I mean, 400 people is a lot of people, but it's not a lot of people in terms of the help that we've given. So this is a big journey, and we're committed to be with you through that. But I don't think people will walk away from it. But Ian Pennell or Ian Gordon, do you have a take on it?
You know, it's Ian Pennell. I believe that it's a very hard task to get this up and running to a perfect situation. But I think it's even a harder task for any government now or in the future to start undoing it, because I don't think they'd be able to survive such a move. So I'm sort of endorsing in different words what Peter has said. It's going to be a long and slow journey getting it to what I call a reasonably perfect state, but it'll be even harder to break it down.
And I think one of the things that MS can do is be a voice of reason and sensible. In other words, whenever we're advocating to government, we do it on a logical, practical basis, and we bring things forward in an unemotional way. There may be emotional stories, but we bring them forward in an unemotional way so that people realise that we're a credible advocate and that we're there to get the best possible system and not just to be a squeaky wheel.
Ian Gordon here, Peter. If I could add a few comments.
Sure.
The government hasn't attempted anything like this for a long, long time, and not at all with the technology they're trying to use. They're rolling out a nationwide program. They had a series of test sites. My wife and I were part of the very early days here in the ACT, and I've seen the NDIS here go through a number of iterations, all each time showing improvement. I have been enormously impressed with the efforts that they're going to make the system worthwhile for the people who are in the service, and our life would be considerably more difficult financially and in every other way without the NDIS who is supporting my wife and in turn therefore supporting me. I remain hopeful that the system will continue to improve. Sure, when you've got the amount of money involved that you have in providing this level of support, and with the government going through its various budgetary and political cycles, there will always be bureaucratic and other difficulties and funding difficulties, but I certainly agree with Peter that this is not something that they're going to be able to turn off. It's an important part of our culture. It sits within the Australian idea of providing a safety net for people who don't have the resources to help themselves. I think it's here to stay. I think it will continue to improve, become more efficient, become more focused, and for the people who really, really need it, it will be there, and we have to make sure that we are there supporting our people, those who are in the NDIS and those who aren't, and we can also make our organisation more effective through providing NDIS services. So I'm very optimistic. It's been only a very short time that this thing's been running, and I'm seeing improvements, and I think we will continue to see improvements.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks.
I'd also add there are some great comments coming through, and for the people who are making comments, rest assured they will be part of the report that goes back to the board after the webinar.
There's been one other question that's come through, and the question is as follows: has funding been reduced because of the perception people living with MS don't need support? I'd be pretty confident to say no. We've lobbied very strongly, even in the days when it was the Productivity Commission report before the NDIS was even launched, that MS should be included in the NDIS right from day one. So anyone who is actually able to demonstrate that they actually have an impairment due to their multiple sclerosis should, you know, approach the NDIA in the planning conversation and work, well, put a case forward as to why they should be receiving some support to meet their unmet needs.
I mean, there's been no explicit carve out and reduction. I mean, we would be very alert to that, and you'd hear us shouting from the hilltops if that was to happen.
Yeah. There's another question that's come through that the carers groups, there is a very active Facebook carers group, and they're conveying that they don't feel well represented. Can I encourage you to really make contact with your MSAC, because I know that that has actually been identified as one of their priority topics as as the things that they're working on. So please, we really do want to make sure that we do understand and gain insights into what is happening with carers, particularly given that under the NDIS the funding is actually directed to the person with the disability as opposed to their carer. So I understand why you might be feeling that you're getting left out of the picture. So please do speak to your MSAC or contact us at MS Connect so that we can actually understand your concerns and get some more insights into your unmet needs.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Okay. Well, at this point, we're all quiet on the link in terms of any questions or comments, but I'll keep going on just a little bit, just in case anybody's typing or thinking. But and are there any any closing comments that either Ian wants to make or Chris? No. Okay. Okay. Well, I think I'm looking at our scrutineers on the other side of the table who are busy watching the screen for any comments, and they're shaking their heads at me saying there's no further questions. So I might thank everybody for participating in the webinar. I hope you found it useful, and as December approaches tomorrow, I'll wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully we'll do one of these again. I now feel as if I'm an expert on webinars, but I think it's due to Andrea and Cher on the other side, who have total control of the technology. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Some thank yous coming in as well.
Okay. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll be closing down very shortly.